Have you ever stumbled upon a secret so explosive that one whisper could wreck an entire family? Maybe even an entire fortune. Picture this: a respected millionaire, a pregnant wife who trusts him completely, and an unexpected mistress lurking in the shadows. In a twist that shatters every rule of loyalty, the millionaire uses his wife's prenatal appointment for his mistress. The tangled web that follows is a roller coaster of guilt, glamour, and heartbreak. If you're ready to embark on a journey where wealth and betrayal collide, this story will draw you in, exposing hidden motives and unstoppable consequences. Adrian Westbrook lived in a world custom-built for spectacle. At 35, he was a self-made millionaire who commanded attention wherever he went. Dark hair, neatly styled, and a perpetual layer of confidence on his face, Adrian was an enigma in the refined corridors of high society. Born in the modest town of Ridgemont, he'd carved his fortune through relentless hours of work, a flair for strategic investments, and a willingness to play the game of social prestige. By the time he married Penelope Beaumont, heiress to the Beaumont shipping empire, he was already on everyone's radar, the man who had it all. From the outside looking in, Adrian and Penelope were a perfect couple. She was a poised blonde with a keen intellect, someone who could discuss the complexities of the European shipping lanes as easily as she could detail the nuances of postmodern art. Their wedding had been the talk of the tabloids, plastered across the society pages magnificent Westbrook-Beaumont nuptials. Over 500 guests sipped vintage champagne under glass chandeliers, while Penelope, dressed in custom Maison Dior, danced with Adrian in front of a garden brimming with white roses and twinkling fairy lights. The city's most prestigious wedding planner, recognized for orchestrating celebrity nuptials, masterminded the event. Even longtime socialite Marilyn Devereux named it the most elegant affair of the decade. This was the glittering facade the Westbrooks presented to the world. Behind the scenes, though, ripples of discontent were forming. Adrian, with his demanding business schedule, had little time for Penelope. She grew accustomed to lonely evenings in their sprawling penthouse on the Upper East Side. He frequently traveled for business, leaving her to the occasional company of her mother, Eleanor Beaumont, a staunchly aristocratic figure who was always ready to remind her daughter of the family's pride. But everything changed when Penelope announced her pregnancy, a long-awaited blessing. Adrian genuinely seemed thrilled when he heard the news. He even insisted on driving her to the first doctor's appointment, a gesture that was a rarity for someone who rarely made time for personal errands. Penelope felt her heart flutter with hope. She had always yearned for a closer connection with her husband, and the baby seemed like the perfect reason for Adrian to prioritize family. They scheduled her prenatal care at the exclusive Westbrook Women's Medical Pavilion, a high-end clinic Adrian had personally funded, named partly to honor his philanthropic efforts. The staff there included Dr. Julian Fairchild, a renowned OB-GYN who'd famously assisted with celebrity births. But beneath his composed exterior, Adrian was restless. A new storm was gathering, a storm named Isabella Moretti. In the hush-hush back channels of society, rumors about an incredibly stunning brunette on Adrian's arm in downtown lounges had begun to spread. Adrian tried to dismiss these as vicious gossip until the rumors turned into photographic evidence. Paparazzi had snapped clandestine photos of him stepping out of his private chauffeured car with a mysterious woman one late evening. He and his legal team scrambled to suppress the pictures, but the damage was already done. His best friend, Armand Castillo, confronted Adrian about it. Armand was a close confidant from Adrian's startup days. He prided himself on telling Adrian the truth, even when it wasn't easy to hear. "Adrian, "Do you have any idea what's at stake?" Armand asked one night in the VIP lounge of the Mayfair Club. "Penelope's pregnant. Her father practically built half of your empire with you. You're playing with fire. If the Beaumonts find out you're having an affair, your entire world will unravel." Adrian just shook his head, swirling the vintage scotch in his glass. He made some half-hearted promise to handle the situation. But the vow was empty words. Adrian was already too invested, too entangled, caught between devotion to his unborn child and an unrelenting passion for Isabella. Isabella Moretti had her own complicated story. Born in Naples, she immigrated to New York with her family when she was just a teenager. She saw her parents toil day and night in a cramped Italian eatery, determined to give her a shot at the American dream. And Isabella, blessed with sharp intelligence and a striking beauty, was determined to make the most of every opportunity. After finishing college, she juggled multiple part-time jobs while chasing her entrepreneurial aspirations. She had eventually launched a modest but upscale boutique specializing in imported Italian dresses. It was at a charity gala in Manhattan where Isabella had volunteered to provide styling services that she first crossed paths with Adrian Westbrook. He was charming, witty, and powerful. She felt drawn to his confidence like a moth to a flame. Meanwhile, Adrian found in Isabella something he wasn't getting from his marriage: spontaneity, unencumbered passion, and an unspoken understanding that life was meant to be lived boldly. To her credit, Isabella initially resisted. She asked him point blank if he was married. Adrian gave her a half-truth. "I'm in a complicated relationship," he said. She tried to pull away, but the emotional spark and her own ambition kept her tethered to him. Before long, they were meeting in discreet penthouse suites and taking weekend getaways under the guise of Adrian's business travel. His money and connections impressed Isabella, who had never known such luxury. But ironically, that wasn't the main draw. She adored Adrian's adventurous spirit, the feeling that something remarkable happened whenever they were together. Of course, she understood the moral complexities. She wasn't proud of the affair, but she found herself rationalizing it. Adrian wasn't happy in his marriage, and she wasn't exactly tearing apart a perfect relationship. All her justifications came crashing down the moment she realized she might be pregnant. For weeks she felt nauseous and unusually tired. With fear and trembling, Isabella used a home test kit. When 2 lines appeared, she called Adrian and left him a voicemail. "I'm worried something's wrong. Please call me back." She avoided the actual word, pregnant, not sure how to handle his reaction. Several tense days went by. Finally, Adrian responded, sounding annoyed on the phone. "I'm in the middle of back-to-back meetings, Isabella. What is it?" His tone softened when she confessed she had missed her period and was experiencing early pregnancy symptoms. "Let's not jump to conclusions," he said. "We'll have you checked out." The problem was Adrian had little time or space to orchestrate a separate medical appointment for Isabella, at least not without raising eyebrows. Penelope was nearing her next prenatal visit, and Adrian's schedule was already hectic. He was juggling major real estate deals and a conference with potential European investors where the Beaumont Shipping Line's partnership was crucial. In the swirl of all this, something reckless formed in his mind. Take Isabella to see Dr. Fairchild using Penelope's appointment. He reasoned it would be simple. Dr. Fairchild was a discreet professional handling celebrities all the time. Also, Adrian funded the clinic, so the staff would do as he asked. The plan was to claim a scheduling oversight slip Isabella into the exam room, briefly make sure everything was discreet, and be out before the staff or Penelope realized what had happened. It was an insane idea, and yet it seemed like an easy fix, a quick way to get Isabella confirmation about her condition. If she wasn't pregnant, no harm done. If she was, then at least Adrian would know what he was dealing with. The day arrived for Penelope's routine prenatal appointment. Adrian insisted on driving her there, a gesture that made her glow with renewed hope about their relationship. She laughed, thinking he finally wanted to be more hands-on with the pregnancy. "Honey, you don't have to do this." "I can take the driver," she said. "I want to." He insisted, forcing a smile. He tried to hide his nerves by discussing mundane business updates during the drive. His phone buzzed with messages from Isabella. He had told her to arrive at the clinic precisely 20 minutes after Penelope's scheduled time. As they pulled up to the Westbrook Women's Medical Pavilion, Adrian escorted Penelope inside his arm, wrapped protectively around her shoulder. The waiting lounge was bright-lined with plush seats and a gold-plated plaque reading Westbrook Pavilion in service of women's health. An elegant water fountain murmured in the corner, an emblem of the clinic's luxury. Dr. Julian Fairchild, whose name carried weight in New York's upper class, greeted them warmly. A tall man in his early 50s, with neatly combed silver hair and kind eyes, he guided Penelope into a private examination room. Adrian followed, looking strangely tense. When Dr. Fairchild asked if Adrian wanted to remain for the ultrasound, Adrian declined, citing a phone call he had to make in the hallway. That small detail pricked Penelope's heart. He can't even stay to see the baby's heartbeat, she thought. But she didn't voice her disappointment, determined to remain the calm, supportive wife. After all, Adrian was there physically present, which was more than she had dared hope for in the last few months. While Penelope changed into the exam gown, Adrian stepped out and hurried down the corridor. He spotted Isabella tiptoeing in, wearing large sunglasses and a headscarf. She looked anxious, glancing at the reception desk, and then at him. Adrian guided her to a small consulting room near the back. There he confronted Dr. Fairchild's assistant, Maria Delgado, a loyal clinic employee who recognized Adrian and rarely questioned his instructions. He whispered, "Ms. Moretti needs a quick checkup from Dr. Fairchild. It's urgent. We have a scheduling conflict, but I trust we can keep this private." Maria frowned, clearly uneasy about the unorthodox request. Yet she felt obligated. Adrian Westbrook donated millions to keep this place running. She complied, telling Isabella to wait while she alerted Dr. Fairchild. Back in Penelope's exam room, Dr. Fairchild was discussing her progress, pointing out the baby's steady heartbeat on the ultrasound. "Penelope, everything looks great. Your next test will be for gestational diabetes screening," he said. Meanwhile, text messages pinged on Dr. Fairchild's phone, presumably from his assistant. He glanced at them, his brows knitting in concern. He carefully wrapped up with Penelope, praising her for her consistent prenatal care. "I'll be back in just a moment, Mrs. Westbrook," he said, stepping out quickly. Dr. Fairchild found Maria in the hallway, a worried expression on her face. She whispered that Adrian had brought someone else needing an urgent exam. "He's requesting your discretion, Dr. Fairchild," Maria murmured. Dr. Fairchild frowned. He prided himself on ethical practice, yet he also knew that the clinic depended heavily on Adrian's funding. The doctor knocked softly on the consulting room door, then entered to find Adrian and Isabella. The tension was thick enough to cut with a scalpel. "Dr. Fairchild." Adrian began clearing his throat. "Isabella here may be in need of a pregnancy test. I know it's sudden, but can you help?" The doctor gave him a long, critical stare. He recognized Isabella from previous gossip, swirling around high society events. In a measured tone, he replied, "Mr. Westbrook, you realize this is highly irregular. I have your wife in the next room." Adrian nodded, pain and panic flickering across his usually confident expression. I understand, but we need your utmost discretion. I trust we can settle this quickly. Fairchild hesitated. Morally, this was a line. He was about to facilitate a consultation for Adrian's mistress, just as he was caring for Adrian's wife, who was blissfully ignorant in the adjacent room. But refusing Adrian outright could jeopardize the clinic's funding and resources for countless patients. Striving for a professional calm, he agreed. Let's do a quick exam. But I won't lie to Penelope if she asks questions. Quickly, Dr. Fairchild began the standard procedure, a simple blood test and a physical exam. Isabella answered questions in hushed tones, her breath catching whenever she thought she heard footsteps. Adrian stood by her, gently rubbing her shoulder, looking more anxious than ever. The exam was over in 20 minutes, a lifetime compressed into a short window. Dr. Fairchild promised to expedite the lab work, but explained that some results might take a couple of hours. They agreed Isabella would wait at a nearby cafe, and Adrian would keep checking his phone for updates. As Dr. Fairchild moved to leave, he gave Adrian a final, sober look. Mr. Westbrook, deception like this has repercussions. I sincerely hope you understand the gravity of what you're doing here. Adrian swallowed. He offered no rebuttal, only a nod, before hastily guiding Isabella out of the clinic via a side exit. Then, like an actor switching roles mid-scene, he slipped back down the corridor, toward Penelope's exam room, calling out, "Honey, I'm so sorry. Urgent business call." Penelope, changing back into her elegant maternity dress, gave him a tired smile. "It's okay, Adrian. I wish you'd seen the ultrasound. Dr. Fairchild says everything looks good." She tried to mask her hurt with optimism. Adrian, feeling a surge of guilt, placed a hand on her shoulder. "That's wonderful news. I promise I'll be there for the next one." He lied. Shortly after the appointment, Penelope sensed something was off. Adrian's behavior was too erratic, his phone buzzing with seemingly urgent notifications. When she teased him about the messages, he brushed it off as European investors. She noticed he was scanning the environment, as if worried they'd be overheard. Penelope also picked up small clues, like the fleeting look of unease on Dr. Fairchild's face when they said their goodbyes. She'd known the doctor long enough to sense that he was hiding discomfort. And then there was the fleeting glimpse of a woman wearing sunglasses and a headscarf rushing out the side door. Penelope dismissed it initially. The clinic served many wealthy or high-profile clients who valued discretion. But the woman's posture, the stance, it vaguely reminded Penelope of someone she'd glimpsed at a distance at one of Adrian's business receptions. That afternoon, after Adrian dropped her off at their penthouse, Penelope retreated to the bedroom for a nap. She found she couldn't sleep, her mind restless. She recalled the rumors swirling around her circle of acquaintances, the hushed speculation that Adrian might be unfaithful. She had always rejected the idea, telling herself it was baseless gossip. But something gnawed at her now. When she drifted off, her dreams were riddled with scenes of betrayal and confusion, her subconscious screaming a warning she didn't want to acknowledge. Meanwhile, Adrian was in a private corner booth of Café Troubadour with Isabella, who kept checking her phone for word from Dr. Fairchild. The air was filled with tension and unspoken worries. What if she was pregnant? What would that mean for Adrian? For Penelope? For everyone involved? She sipped a cup of green tea, her hands trembling on the saucer. Adrian tried to maintain composure. "We'll handle whatever the result is. If you are pregnant, I'll figure something out." Isabella frowned. "You'll figure something out? That's not exactly comforting. You have a wife who's pregnant, by the way, and a powerful father-in-law who can ruin you." Adrian's gaze slid to the floor. He was no longer the confident alpha magnate. He was just a trapped man. Suddenly, Isabella's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, and her heart nearly stopped. It was Maria Delgado relaying a message from Dr. Fairchild. "The results are positive. Please schedule a follow-up." Isabella placed the phone on the table with trembling hands. Adrian just stared at a complete loss for words. That night, Adrian returned to a quiet penthouse. Penelope was in the living room, reading a book on parenting tips. She looked up at him and smiled, though her eyes carried a trace of fatigue. "Long day?" she asked. He nodded, crossing the room to place a quick kiss on her forehead. Penelope's heart ached at his touch, longing for the days when their affection was genuine and spontaneous. In the sanctuary of his personal study, a spacious room lined with rare books and a large mahogany desk, Adrian poured himself a shot of whiskey. This was where he usually conducted late-night conference calls or hashed out last-minute strategy plans. Tonight, though, he couldn't focus on business at all. He stood at the window, gazing at the city lights. The news of Isabella's pregnancy weighed heavily on him. Thoughts crashed into one another. How do I hide this? Is there even a way to keep it secret? A part of him felt that telling Penelope the truth might be the only ethical path forward, but the consequences would be catastrophic, professionally, financially, and personally. He pictured Penelope's face crumpling in anguish, the condemnation from her family, the potential collapse of the Westbrook empire. Everything he'd built could vanish in an instant. In a state of emotional turmoil, he dialed Armand Castillo's number. "I need your advice," Adrian admitted, the moment Armand picked up. There was a pause, then Armand asked quietly, "Is this about the Mistress? I heard some new rumors." Adrian let out a humorless laugh. "She's pregnant. I just found out." A sharp exhale on the other end of the line. "You can't be serious," Armand said. Adrian grimaced. "Do I sound like I'm joking?" The conversation spiraled as Adrian explained he'd already used Penelope's appointment for Isabella. Armand's shocked silence said it all. Finally, he spoke. "You're playing a dangerous game, my friend. You need to come clean or come up with a plan. You know Penelope better than anyone. She'll suspect something soon." In her bedroom, Penelope lay awake. She heard Adrian talking in his study, his voice muffled through the closed door. She wondered whom he was speaking to at this late hour. Despite her rational self telling her not to pry curiosity, and a flicker of dread prodded her to press her ear against the door. She caught fragmented words. "Appointment pregnant, Isabella. I don't know what to do." Each word felt like a bullet to her heart. She backed away quietly, tears swelling in her eyes. Her suspicions were brutally confirmed. It felt as if the floor had vanished beneath her. Penelope recalled the conversation with her mother that morning, a casual chat about baby names and baby shower themes. Eleanor Beaumont had commented how important trust and mutual respect were in marriage, especially when expecting a child. Trust. The word struck Penelope like a thunderbolt. Everything we've built was a lie. She realized that all the nights Adrian had been gone, all his rushed phone calls, the presence of that mysterious woman at the clinic, none of it was coincidence. Though trembling, she resolved to gather more facts before confronting him. She needed to understand the extent of this betrayal, whether it was a passing fling or something deeper. She had no idea Isabella was already pregnant. If she did, she might have left that very night. The next day, Penelope embarked on a subtle detective mission. She phoned Dr. Fairchild's office to confirm her next prenatal appointment and found an unusual hesitance in the receptionist's voice. We have you scheduled for 2 weeks from now. Let me just verify that the time wasn't mistakenly cancelled." Penelope frowned. "Why would it be cancelled?" the receptionist stammered. "There's a note here about a scheduling conflict. Let me check with Dr. Fairchild." Instantly, alarm bells rang in Penelope's mind. So that's how it happened. Adrian used my time slot to see that woman. She politely ended the call, determined to unearth more. She reached out to a friend, Lydia Montrose, a well-connected socialite who seemed to know everyone's business in Manhattan. Over coffee at an upscale cafe, Penelope feigned casual curiosity, asking Lydia if she'd heard any new rumors about Adrian. Lydia, never one to hold back gossip, leaned in conspiratorially. She mentioned seeing Adrian with a woman at a gallery opening 2 months ago. She even had a name, Isabella Moretti, I think. She's some sort of boutique owner. Stunning with dark hair. I tried to approach Adrian, but he looked like he didn't want to be seen. Penelope's heart twisted painfully. So it's her. But outwardly she maintained composure. Oh, Adrian probably had business with her. She lied smoothly, changing the topic to avoid further scrutiny. That afternoon, Penelope ventured downtown. She discreetly visited Isabella's boutique, Moretti Couture, just to see the woman behind her heartbreak. The boutique was classy, adorned with trendy Italian dresses, silver mannequins, and stylish decor. Penelope's breath caught when she recognized Isabella from the hush of the clinic hallway, now behind a counter, assisting a customer. Isabella wore a poised, professional smile and a sleek black dress. There was an effortless sophistication in her manner. In another life, Penelope might have admired her. This is the woman who's involved with my husband, she thought, her heart pounding in her chest. Pretending to browse, Penelope observed Isabella's grace. Guilt and confusion flooded Penelope's mind. Was Isabella truly the villain here? Or was she just as trapped by Adrian's manipulations? Over the next hour, Penelope gathered the courage to leave. As she exited, Isabella caught sight of her and offered a warm farewell. "Thank you for visiting Moretti Couture. We hope to see you again." Penelope, swallowing the bitterness rising in her throat, managed a polite nod. She could sense that Isabella didn't recognize her as Adrian's wife. Isabella's expression remained relaxed and businesslike. The betrayal stung even more. Meanwhile, Isabella was grappling with her own turmoil. Confirming her pregnancy was a seismic shift. She had never envisioned herself as the other woman, let alone an expectant mother in such a scandalous setup. She found it harder to hide her physical symptoms. The mild morning nausea, the acute sense of smell each day, made it more real. She confided in her only close friend, Teresa Alvarez, who worked at a nearby art gallery. Teresa, known for her blunt honesty, didn't mince words. "This is going to blow up in your face if you don't figure out where you stand. Adrian's not single. His wife is pregnant too. It's not just a fling anymore. It's a full-blown crisis." Isabella had no defense. She knew Teresa was right. Adrian's messages were becoming more sporadic, more frantic. He was working overtime to keep the situation hidden. "Once the initial shock wears off, we'll talk about solutions," he told her in a late-night phone call. "But do nothing rash. Please." Dr. Fairchild, meanwhile, was wrestling with the ethics of continuing to treat both women, one in the light, the other in the shadows. Every time he saw Penelope, a pang of guilt gnawed at him. He considered refusing to treat Isabella altogether, but that would likely push her out to another doctor and set the stage for an even more dangerous chain of secrecy. At least under his supervision, he could ensure some level of responsible care for both women. As the days turned into weeks, the tension escalated. Penelope diligently attended her scheduled checkups, always accompanied by Adrian, who tried to portray a sense of normalcy. She smiled politely for Dr. Fairchild, who tried to hide his inner conflict. Behind the scenes, Adrian found ways to cover Isabella's medical expenses at the same clinic under a different name. No less so she could receive prenatal care without arousing suspicion. The deception grew increasingly elaborate, involving hush money to certain staff members. If the stakes weren't already high enough, they were about to get worse. It was a chilly afternoon when Penelope finally decided she couldn't stay silent any longer. Armed with the knowledge of Isabella's identity and the near certainty that Adrian was entangled in an affair, she confronted him in his study. The confrontation wasn't the dramatic explosion one might expect. Instead, it was subdued, laced with heartbreak. She closed the study door and stood there, her hands trembling. "Adrian," she began softly, "I know you've been seeing another woman." Adrian's expression shifted from surprise to dread. He attempted to feign ignorance. "Penelope, what are you talking about?" She held his gaze, tears forming at the corners of her eyes. "Her name is Isabella Moretti, isn't it?" Adrian froze. The color drained from his face. He stammered, How did you—" She cut him off. "I heard your phone call. I visited her boutique. I recognized her from the clinic." The final piece of revelation hit him like a sledgehammer. "The clinic. You saw her there." He sank into his leather chair, burying his face in his hands. He realized the extent of the web he'd woven. Penelope's voice shook as she continued. "Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? I've tried to be a good wife, Adrian. I've been patient, supportive." She broke off, choking back a sob. "I deserve the truth." "Is she pregnant?" Adrian looked up at her, his eyes brimming with guilt. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. His silence confirmed her worst suspicions. Penelope's legs buckled, and she staggered backward until she found a seat on a nearby chaise. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "It was a mistake," Adrian finally whispered, his voice hollow. "I never meant for it to go this far." "I'm sorry." She let out a broken laugh. "You're sorry. Do you have any idea what you've done? You used my appointment. You paraded her through our clinic. You've humiliated me and compromised our marriage. And you've endangered our child's future." Adrian moved toward her, but she recoiled. The heartbreak in her eyes was tinged with rage. "Don't touch me," she hissed, a layer of steel in her usually gentle tone. In that moment, Adrian comprehended the magnitude of his betrayal. This was no fleeting affair. It was a catastrophic breach of trust. He stammered apologies, pleading with her to let him explain. But Penelope was too wounded to listen. She got up, steadied herself, and in a voice trembling with sorrow said, "I need space. I can't think with you near me." She left him there alone in the study, surrounded by the ghosts of his misguided choices. In the wake of the confrontation, Penelope left the penthouse and sought refuge at her mother's estate. Eleanor Beaumont welcomed her daughter with open arms, though Penelope only revealed part of the story, at first citing marital problems without delving into the sordid details. Eleanor was no fool. She sensed the severity of the situation, but waited for Penelope to open up on her own terms. Adrian, for his part, felt the oppressive weight of guilt and fear. He dreaded a confrontation with Penelope's father, the formidable Victor Beaumont, who wielded enough financial power to topple Adrian's empire if he chose. Adrian kept trying to call Penelope, leaving voicemails that went unanswered. He sought counsel from Armand Castillo, who told him bluntly, "You've dug yourself into a massive hole. Evasion won't save you now. You need to figure out if this marriage can be salvaged, and if so, how." Consumed by anxiety, Adrian also struggled with what to do about Isabella. She was still carrying his child. Part of him felt duty-bound to take care of her. Another part wondered if stepping away was the only way to salvage his marriage. It was a moral quagmire. Each day that passed without a decision felt like a slow march to ruin. Meanwhile, Isabella recognized the shift in Adrian's demeanor. He became distant, offering cold reassurances. "I'll support you financially," he said, dodging any deeper emotional commitment. She recognized that he was torn between paternal responsibility and the desire to cling to his marriage. Her own guilt magnified with each passing day. She pictured Penelope's face, though she'd only seen her briefly in the boutique, and felt pangs of remorse. What if the roles were reversed, she wondered. She tried calling Adrian, hoping for clarity, but he rarely picked up. When he did, his tone was clipped and fraught with tension. At the next clandestine doctor's appointment with Dr. Fairchild, Isabella found him more curt than usual. He relayed the clinical facts about her pregnancy without any of the warmth she'd seen him show Penelope. Isabella could hardly blame him. She left the clinic feeling alone and conflicted, weighed down by the knowledge that her presence there was an open wound in the lives of others. The inevitable confrontation arrived a week later. Victor Beaumont summoned Adrian to the family's estate. The elder Beaumont wasn't typically a man of many words, but when he spoke, it carried the force of 1,000 judgments. Adrian arrived, greeted by stone-faced servants who led him to Victor's study, a richly furnished room with antiques and maritime paintings reflecting the Beaumont shipping legacy. Victor sat behind an oak desk, his posture rigid. "Sit," he said, pointing to a chair. Adrian complied, his palms sweating. "Penelope is distraught," Victor began. "She's told me everything," Adrian swallowed. "Sir, I can only say how sorry I am." Victor cut him off with a raised hand. "Sorry?" "You've tarnished our family's name, betrayed my daughter, and quite possibly threatened the future of your unborn child with Penelope. Do you have any idea what you've done?" His voice thundered through the room. Adrian felt cornered. "I understand the gravity of my actions," he managed. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes to make amends." Victor's face hardened. "Amends? This is beyond amends. If Penelope decides she wants a divorce, I will support her financially and legally. You do realize she has every right to claim a large portion of your assets." Adrian nodded, his heart hammering. He knew the prenuptial agreements favored Penelope heavily, a concession he'd made willingly at the time of their marriage. Victor leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "Penelope might consider reconciliation, but that depends entirely on you and on whether this person is actually carrying your child. If so, you've compromised our entire family. Have you even thought about the ramifications?" Adrian felt a wave of despair. "I have. I'm prepared to support my child no matter what. But I'd give anything to save my marriage." Silence reigned for a moment. Then Victor spoke in a tone that sent a chill up Adrian's spine. "Keep in mind, we have the resources to ensure you'll never step foot in a Beaumont-affiliated project again. Your board, your investors. Everyone can disappear in an instant if I choose to pull my support. You're walking on very thin ice. Pray that my daughter finds it in her heart to forgive you." With that, Victor dismissed him. Adrian left, feeling like he'd been in the presence of a judge handing down a death sentence. Around the same time, Isabella reached a breaking point. She hadn't seen Adrian in days. He was ignoring her texts, responding with one-word answers. Or not at all. One rainy evening, she sent him a curt message. "We need to talk. Urgent. Please come to the boutique." To her surprise, he agreed. When Adrian arrived, the boutique was dark except for a single lamp illuminating a corner of designer dresses. Isabella stood near the mannequins, her arms crossed protectively over her belly. "I'm sorry it's come to this, but I need clarity," she began. Adrian nodded, avoiding her gaze. She continued, "I'm pregnant with your child. I can't do this alone." "Where do we stand?" Adrian struggled for words. "I'm in a terrible position. My wife is pregnant too. She's left me, or at least she's staying with her parents. Her father is threatening my entire livelihood. I don't know if there's a future for us, me and you." Isabella's lips trembled. She had feared this, but hearing it confirmed was devastating. "So was I just a fling?" she asked, tears shining in her eyes. Adrian's voice cracked. "I did care for you, Isabella. I still do. But everything spiraled out of control." A tense silence ensued. Finally, Isabella wiped her tears and drew a shaky breath. "If you can't be in a real relationship with me, then I want a guarantee you'll provide for this child. I deserve that." Adrian swallowed hard. "Of course I will. I promise." She nodded through heartbreak etched her features. "Then go. Figure out your marriage, your business, or whatever you need. Just understand that you can't keep me in limbo forever. If you fail to uphold your promise to help raise or support this baby, I won't stay silent. I'll go public if I have to." This final statement hung in the air with menacing weight. Adrian stared at the floor, realizing that Isabella had him cornered as well. He left the boutique that night with no illusions. He was trapped between two irreconcilable worlds. Back at the Beaumont estate, Penelope wrestled with the possibility of divorce. She confided in her mother, who gently offered advice. "You have every right to leave him, my dear. But before you make that decision, ask yourself, does he truly want to fix this? Is there any chance for forgiveness? If not now, then eventually?" Penelope found herself torn. She still loved Adrian, or at least who he used to be. But the betrayals were deep, and her dignity was on the line. Eventually, Penelope agreed to meet Adrian in a neutral location, the lavish rooftop garden of the Beaumont Hotel, an iconic structure her family owned. The garden overlooked the city skyline, ironically reminiscent of the life they had once shared. Adrian arrived looking more disheveled than Penelope had ever seen him. Dark circles smudged under his eyes, his normally perfect hair slightly unkempt. This alone told her he was unraveling under the pressure. Their conversation began in strained politeness, but it quickly delved into the depths of their pain. Adrian tried to explain how the affair started, describing how he'd felt isolated in the marriage, always overshadowed by the Beaumont empire. Penelope didn't let him shift blame. "I was alone too," she said, her voice breaking. "I tried to reach you so many times. You chose to find comfort in another woman instead of facing our problems together." They talked for hours, tears flowing freely on both sides. Penelope admitted she wasn't sure if she could ever trust him again. Adrian, on his knees in front of her, at one point, begged for a chance to make amends. He promised therapy, promised to end the affair definitively. Then he dropped the final bombshell. "She's pregnant." Penelope's face went white. She'd suspected it, but hearing the confirmation was like being punched in the stomach. She nearly collapsed onto a marble bench, her breath shallow. Adrian reached for her hand, and she yanked it away. "That child is innocent," Penelope said, her voice trembling. "I wouldn't wish any harm on him or her, but I don't know if I can live with that constant reminder." Adrian nodded, tears streaking his face. "I understand," he whispered. For the first time, Penelope saw genuine remorse in his eyes. Is it enough, she wondered? Is it enough to overcome this betrayal? With emotions still raw, Penelope sought professional help. She visited Dr. Elaine Goodwin, a renowned therapist who specialized in marital crises among the elite. Dr. Goodwin's office was a serene space with calming earth tones, a stark contrast to the chaos within Penelope's heart. Over multiple sessions, Penelope processed her betrayal and found a semblance of clarity. She recognized that her anger, while justified, was also fueled by years of pent-up disappointment in Adrian's emotional absence. Adrian also sought therapy on his own, at first, then in couples sessions with Penelope. Each meeting was like peeling off another layer of a toxic onion, painful, tear-inducing but necessary. He admitted he'd sought validation outside the marriage because he felt overshadowed by the Beaumont family legacy. He felt inadequate, as though no matter how successful he became, he'd always be the outsider who'd married into wealth. None of this excused his betrayal, but it offered context. Along the way, they discussed the unborn child Isabella carried. Penelope wrestled with complicated feelings: compassion for the innocent baby, resentment toward Isabella, a lingering sense of betrayal toward Adrian. She knew she had a decision to make: either begin to forgive or walk away. The couples therapy reached a pivotal moment when Dr. Goodwin asked Penelope, "What is it you truly need from Adrian to consider moving forward?" Through tears, Penelope listed her needs: honesty, transparency, a clear plan to support Isabella's baby without continuing the affair, and a renewed commitment to their own child. For Adrian, these demands were steep but necessary. He agreed to draw up legal documents, ensuring financial support for Isabella's child, and severing romantic ties. They'd maintain only minimal communication regarding the child's well-being. Adrian also vowed to devote more time and emotional energy to Penelope, attending all future prenatal appointments and seeking to mend the rift he'd caused. In a final agonizing step, Adrian arranged a meeting with Isabella, this time at a quiet cafe, to avoid prying eyes. It was perhaps the hardest conversation he had ever initiated, second only to his confession to Penelope. Isabella arrived in a loose-fitting dress, her pregnancy starting to show. She looked both anxious and resigned. He explained the new arrangement, a legally binding agreement for child support and shared responsibility, yet an end to their romance. Isabella stared at him with a mix of heartbreak and defiance. "You're choosing her," she said, a statement of fact rather than a question. Adrian nodded, tears brimming. "She's my wife, and we have a child on the way too. But that doesn't mean I won't be there for our child," he said gently. For Isabella, it was a bitter pill to swallow. She felt used, discarded. Yet looking at Adrian's tormented face, she also felt a glimmer of pity. She knew this was the only logical outcome. "I need security," she whispered. "If you ever try to walk away from our child, I'll fight for everything I can get." Adrian nodded, feeling a profound sense of shame. "I promise I won't abandon you or the baby," he assured her. They parted ways, tears and regrets thick in the air. It was a heartbreak that left both feeling hollow. Isabella watched him leave, reflecting on the choices that led her here. She resolved to start anew, focusing on her boutique and preparing for motherhood, albeit under a shadow of scandal. For better or worse, her chapter with Adrian Westbrook was coming to a close. The months that followed were a test of everyone's resolve. Penelope and Adrian continued therapy. Dr. Fairchild oversaw Penelope's pregnancy, offering gentle support whenever her fears crept up. The doctor also treated Isabella, ensuring her child's healthy development. Though the appointments were scheduled meticulously to avoid any awkward overlap, the staff at Westbrook Pavilion whispered about the secret scandal, always mindful of the hush money that had been circulated. Penelope gave birth to a beautiful baby girl, Eliana Grace Westbrook. Adrian was by her side throughout the labor tears of joy mingling with remorse. In those moments, they found a fragile sense of unity. Eliana's birth felt like a second chance, a reminder that life could still bring happiness despite past betrayals. Several weeks later, Isabella gave birth to a boy, Luca Adrian Moretti. Even from a distance, Adrian kept track of the baby's well-being, sending funds and gifts. He visited discreetly once or twice to ensure all was well. Isabella, though still hurt, was true to her word. She didn't impede his involvement. But the emotional bond between them had changed, tempered by the harsh realities of their circumstances. Gradually, Penelope and Adrian rebuilt a semblance of family life. It wasn't perfect, but it was built on a more honest foundation. Penelope established clear boundaries about Adrian's contact with Isabella. Adrian willingly reported every text and email regarding child support or medical updates about Luca. It was an unconventional arrangement full of tension and fragile trust. On the business side, Victor Beaumont kept an eagle eye on Adrian. Though the patriarch continued to partner with Adrian in various ventures, the relationship was palpably cooler. Adrian worked tirelessly to prove he could be both a capable businessman and a reformed husband. Time didn't heal all wounds, but it gave them room to breathe. Months had passed since the truth unraveled, since Penelope confronted Adrian, since Isabella confirmed the pregnancy, since everything that once seemed immovable in their marriage had cracked open. And yet there they were, sitting in a quiet therapy room, not as enemies, not even fully as partners, but as two people trying to figure out what was left and whether it could ever be whole again. Penelope had made one thing very clear early on. "I will not stay with you for appearances for Eliana or for the Beaumont name. If I stay, it will be because I believe something real still exists between us. Otherwise, I walk." Adrian had nodded at the time, a lump in his throat too large to speak around, and since then he had truly tried to show her that he heard her. In those first few months, he rearranged his entire life. He stepped back from his most demanding business ventures, delegating major responsibilities to trusted associates. Late-night meetings became rare. Instead, his evenings were filled with lullabies, diaper changes, and pacing the nursery floor until Eliana fell asleep. He'd never imagined that the soft hum of a baby monitor or the sleepy weight of his daughter on his shoulder could bring him more peace than the buzz of Wall Street. But it did. In fact, it was the one thing that made him feel like he was finally doing something right. Penelope noticed, quietly. She didn't rush to congratulate him or offer praise, but she observed the consistency, the sincerity. She watched as he documented every message exchanged with Isabella, as he carefully transferred child support each month without ever trying to bend the boundaries they had agreed upon. There was no romantic rekindling yet. Their conversations remained mostly practical about Eliana's feeding schedule, pediatric visits, and logistics. But occasionally the walls thinned, a shared laugh over Eliana's expression when trying lemon for the first time, a lingering glance when their hands brushed during the bedtime routine. Glimmers, not flames. In therapy, Dr. Goodwin guided them gently. Healing doesn't always mean forgetting she had told Penelope. It means choosing to grow through the pain instead of being trapped by it. One day, Dr. Goodwin posed a pivotal question. Penelope, if you were to grade Adrian not as a husband, past, but as a husband today, how would you rate him? Penelope exhaled slowly. He's trying. Harder than I ever expected. He's present, transparent. With Eliana, he's patient and attentive. I still hurt deeply. But I can't deny that he's working to become a better man. Adrian didn't speak, but his eyes glistened. Still, the shadow of Isabella's child remained. Every month, Adrian received updates about Luca photos, milestones, medical notes. He shared everything with Penelope down to the last word. And to her surprise, she didn't flinch every time. The sting was still there, but over time it dulled. When Luca's first birthday approached, Penelope surprised even herself. "You can send him a gift," she said quietly. "He's your son. Just keep it simple." Adrian had nodded almost in disbelief. "Thank you," he whispered. That gesture marked a turning point. It didn't erase the betrayal, but it acknowledged that they were moving through it, not around it. Outside the therapy room, life was cautiously blooming. Penelope began accepting curated art contracts again, her passion returning slowly with each exhibit she designed. Adrian, though still under Victor Beaumont's wary eye, was proving that he could rebuild not only his business, but his integrity. Their relationship was no longer polished perfection. It was real, sometimes tense, sometimes raw. But it was anchored now, not in illusion, but in intention. One crisp afternoon, as they sat on the balcony watching Eliana babble over a set of colorful blocks, Penelope looked over at Adrian. "I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive you," she said. "But I believe you mean what you're doing now. And maybe that's a start." Adrian reached for her hand, not to pull her closer, but simply to hold space beside her. "No more promises," he said softly. "Just proof. One day at a time. And for now, that was enough. Thank you for accompanying me on this roller coaster journey of deception, heartbreak, and the glimmer of redemption." The millionaire took the mistress to the doctor. Using the appointment, scheduled for his pregnant wife, reminds us that even in a world of wealth and privilege, human emotions, love, trust, betrayal, remain intensely real. Adrian's double life threatened not only his marriage, but also his sense of self. Penelope grappled with whether love can truly overcome betrayal, and Isabella learned the hard way that secrecy comes at a heavy price. A gasp rippled through the gilded ballroom of the St. Regis Hanoi. All eyes were on the woman in crimson. Her hand still raised her face a mask of triumph. Before her, the gentle, pregnant wife of billionaire mogul Marcus Thorne stumbled a hand protectively, clutching her swollen belly, the imprint of a sapap blooming on her cheek. The city's elite watched breathless as the mistress, bold and unrepentant, declared her victory. But the real drama wasn't the public humiliation or the shattered illusion of a perfect marriage. The true bombshell was nestled deep inside the womb, a secret waiting to be revealed not by words, but by the frantic telling rhythm of a tiny unborn heart. Isabella Thorne believed her life was a fairy tale. At 26, she was the wife of Marcus Thorne, a man whose name was synonymous with power in Southeast Asia's tech scene. Their love story was the stuff of legend, a whirlwind romance that saw a humble art curator marry into one of Hanoi's most influential families. Marcus was her everything charming, attentive, and fiercely protective. He had given her a life beyond her wildest dreams, a sprawling penthouse overlooking West Lake, a wardrobe filled with bespoke creations from designers like Kong Tri, and a love that felt as solid as the ancient stones of the nearby Temple of Literature. Now 6 months pregnant with their first child, a son, Isabella felt her world was complete. The nursery was a symphony of soft blues and creams filled with handcrafted toys and imported furniture. Marcus had been ecstatic, hosting lavish dinners to announce the heir to the Thorne empire. He would often rest his hand on her belly, his eyes alight with a joy that seemed to mirror her own. "Our legacy, my love," he'd whisper, his voice thick with emotion. "Everything I do for you and for him." But lately, hairline cracks had begun to appear in the flawless facade of their life. Marcus was working later, his phone calls becoming more frequent and hushed. He'd attribute it to a new acquisition, a hostile takeover that required his undivided attention. Isabella, trusting and devoted, accepted his explanations. She'd wait for him, the chef-prepared meals growing cold on the polished mahogany table, her own reflection in the panoramic windows, her only company. The whispers started subtly, a shadow of a rumor caught in the clinking of champagne glasses at charity galas. A name, Camilla, was mentioned in hushed tones by women adorned in diamonds and envy. Isabella ignored them. The high society of Hanoi was a viper's nest of jealousy, and she, the ingenue, who had captured its most eligible bachelor, was the prime target. Camilla, as Isabella would soon learn, was Camilla Tran, a ruthlessly ambitious socialite and a former flame of Marcus's from his university days. While Isabella exuded a quiet, cultured grace, Camilla was a firestorm. Her laughter was loud, her dresses were daring, and her ambition was an open secret. She had recently returned to Hanoi after a stint in Singapore, and her re-entry into their circle was as subtle as a lightning strike. The first time Isabella felt a genuine pang of unease was at the annual Vietnam Innovators Gala, held at the opulent St. Regis Hanoi. Marcus, who was receiving the top award, was uncharacteristically distracted all evening. His eyes kept flitting towards the entrance, his grip on her hand just a fraction too tight. And then Camilla had arrived. She wore a crimson dress that clung to her like a second skin. A stark, audacious slash of color in a sea of elegant pastels and classic blacks. She moved through the crowd with the predatory grace of a panther, her gaze locking onto Marcus across the ballroom. Isabella saw the flicker of something in her husband's eyes. Not just recognition, but something deeper, more complicated. A ghost of a memory, a shared history that excluded her. Throughout the night she watched as Camilla artfully cornered Marcus, her hand lingering on his arm, her laughter echoing a little too loudly in their conversations. Marcus, for his part, seemed flustered, a state so alien to his usual composed demeanor that it set Isabella's nerves on edge. "She's just an old friend, darling," he had reassured her later that night, his voice smooth as silk. A bit intense but harmless. He had pulled her into his arms, his lips finding hers, and for a moment the warmth of his embrace, melted her fears. She wanted to believe him. To doubt Marcus was to doubt the very foundation of her world. But the seeds of doubt had been planted. A week later, a receipt for a lavish bouquet of black roses, a flower Isabella detested but knew was Camilla's favorite, fell out of his briefcase. He'd brushed it off as a corporate gift. Then there was the late-night text that buzzed on his phone, a simple "thinking of you" from a number he quickly deleted. The excuses became more elaborate, the distance between them growing from a hairline crack to a chasm. Isabella felt a profound and suffocating loneliness. The sprawling penthouse, once a symbol of her fairy tale life, now felt like a gilded cage. Her friends, mostly wives of Marcus's business associates, offered sympathetic but ultimately hollow words. They were part of this world. They understood its unspoken rules, the silent accommodations, the turning of a blind eye. But Isabella's heart, pure and perhaps a little naive, couldn't accept that. Love to her was not a transaction or an arrangement. It was a sacred, all-consuming truth. The pregnancy, once her greatest joy, now became a source of anxiety. She felt a desperate need to protect her unborn son, not just from the world, but from the encroaching shadows in her own home. She tried to talk to Marcus to break through the wall he was meticulously building around himself. "Is everything all right, Marcus?" she asked one evening, her hand on his arm as he stared out at the city lights. "You seem so far away." He turned his face a carefully constructed mask of affection. "Just stress, my love. This deal is draining. Once it's over, it'll be just the three of us. I promise." He tilted her chin up and kissed her, a perfunctory gesture that no longer reached his eyes. Isabella knew with a certainty that chilled her to the bone that he was lying. The deal wasn't about business. The hostile takeover was happening right under her roof, and the enemy was not a rival corporation, but a woman in a crimson dress who smelled of black roses and broken promises. The fairy tale was over. Isabella was trapped, pregnant, and alone, standing on the precipice of a devastating truth, with no idea just how brutal the revelation would be. The breaking point arrived with an embossed, cream-colored invitation. The Thorn Corporation was celebrating its 50th anniversary with a grand ball. It was to be the social event of the season, a testament to the family's enduring legacy and power. For Isabella, it felt less like a celebration and more like a stage for the final act of her disintegrating marriage. In the weeks leading up to the event, Marcus was a whirlwind of activity, but his focus was sharp, his mood almost buoyant. He presented Isabella with a stunning midnight blue gown by a Parisian couturier and a sapphire necklace that mirrored the depths of West Lake. "You will be the most beautiful woman there," he said, his voice brimming with a sincerity she hadn't heard in months. "The mother of my son, the queen of my heart." For a fleeting, hopeful moment, Isabella allowed herself to believe him. Perhaps the affair, the whispers, the lies, had been a fleeting madness. Perhaps this night was his way of reaffirming their bond, of showing the world, and her, that she was the one who truly mattered. She pushed her anxieties down, focusing on the baby's gentle kicks, a secret language of reassurance between mother and child. The night of the ballroom of the St. Regis Hanoi, was transformed into an enchanted forest from a Vietnamese folk tale. Thousands of orchids cascaded from the ceilings, and the air was thick with the scent of jasmine and the low hum of high-powered conversations. Isabella on Marcus's arm was a vision of serene elegance. The deep blue of her gown complemented her pregnancy, and the thorn sapphires at her throat glittered with every turn of her head. She smiled. She mingled. She played the part of the perfect billionaire's wife, all while a cold knot of dread tightened in her stomach. She knew Camilla would be there. It was inevitable. And sure enough, she saw her holding court by the champagne fountain, not in her usual audacious red, but in a startlingly white, almost bridal gown. The dress was a deliberate, provocative choice, an open challenge. Camilla's eyes found Isabella's across the room, and she offered a slow, deliberate smile that was anything but friendly. Marcus stiffened beside her. "Ignore her," he murmured, his grip on her elbow becoming possessive. "Tonight is about us." But Camilla had no intention of being ignored. As the night wore on, she seemed to be everywhere Isabella was. If Isabella moved to the terrace for a breath of fresh air, Camilla would appear moments later, her laughter sharp and piercing. If Isabella paused to speak with an acquaintance, Camilla would glide past her perfume, the cloying scent of black roses, leaving a toxic trail. It was a calculated campaign of psychological warfare, and it was working. Isabella's composure began to fray. The climax came just after the main speeches. Marcus had just delivered a moving tribute to his family and the future of his company, concluding with a toast to my beautiful wife, Isabella, and our son, who will one day lead this legacy. The room erupted in applause. Beaming Marcus turned to kiss her, a public display of affection designed to cement their image as the perfect couple. It was in that moment of manufactured bliss that Camilla made her move. She strode towards their central table, her white dress parting the sea of guests like the prow of a ship. There was no hesitation in her steps, no doubt in her eyes. The murmuring of the crowd died down as she approached a collective intake of breath, creating a vacuum of silence in the grand ballroom. She stopped directly in front of Isabella, who was still seated. Marcus, caught off guard, stood halfway, his smile frozen on his face. Legacy. Camilla's voice was clear and cold, slicing through the silence. "Your son." She laughed, a short, sharp, ugly sound. "Marcus, you are a wonderful storyteller, but you seem to have forgotten the main character." She turned her venomous gaze on Isabella. "You poor, pathetic little thing. Did you really believe all of it?" The love story. The happy family. Isabella, stunned into silence, could only stare up at her. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. "What are you talking about?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What am I talking about?" Camilla's voice rose, theatrical and cruel. "I'm talking about the fact that the child you are carrying is not the only Thorn heir. I'm talking about the fact that Marcus has been with me in my bed every night he told you he was working late." Gasps rippled through the room. People were now openly staring their phones, discreetly raised to capture the unfolding drama. Marcus finally found his voice. "Camilla, that's enough. You're making a scene. I'm making a scene," she shrieked, her composure finally cracking to reveal the raw fury beneath. "You're the one who has been living a lie. You promised me, Marcus. You promised you would leave her." She then looked back at Isabella, her eyes filled with a terrifying mix of pity and contempt. "He was never going to leave me." This, she gestured at Isabella's belly, was just a little complication, an air for the public. But his heart, his passion, that belongs to me. Isabella felt the world tilt on its axis. The faces of the guests blurred into a grotesque gallery of gawking masks. She looked at Marcus silently, pleading with him to deny it, to say something to defend her. But he stood there, his face pale, his eyes darting between the two women, a trapped animal. His silence was the only confession she needed. Tears welled in Isabella's eyes, hot and shameful. She felt a protective instinct surge through her, a primal need to shield her son from this ugliness. She tried to stand to escape the suffocating scrutiny. "Please, stop," she managed to say. But Camilla was not finished. She saw the tears, the vulnerability, and she went in for the kill. "You think you've won? You think this baby solidifies your position? You are nothing but an incubator, a vessel." And then, with a movement so swift it seemed to surprise even herself, Camilla leaned forward and swung her arm. Crack! The sound was sharp and shockingly loud in the silent room. Isabella's head snapped to the side, the force of the blow sending a jolt through her entire body. A collective horrified gasp erupted from the onlookers. For a moment, there was only the stinging heat on her cheek and the stunned realization of what had just happened. Camilla the Mistress had slapped the pregnant wife of Marcus Thorne in front of everyone. Isabella stumbled back, her hand flying to her cheek, but her other arm wrapped instinctively desperately around her stomach. The humiliation was a physical blow, a crushing weight that stole the air from her lungs. She looked at the faces around her, the shock, the pity, the morbid curiosity. She looked at Marcus, whose face was a canvas of horror and indecision, and then she looked at Camilla, who stood there, her chest heaving, her hand still tingling, a triumphant, hateful glare in her eyes. The fairy tale had not just ended. It had been violently, publicly, and irrevocably shattered. And as a sharp, cramping pain shot through her abdomen, Isabella realized the slap was not the most painful blow she would receive that night. The real agony was just beginning. The slap echoed in the cavernous ballroom, a definitive brutal end to the night's festivities. The immediate aftermath was a chaotic tableau of shock and confusion. For a heartbeat, everyone, including Marcus, seemed frozen. Then the world lurched back into motion. Isabella, her mind reeling from the dual assault of humiliation and physical pain, felt her knees buckle. The sharp cramp in her lower abdomen intensified, radiating outwards in a wave of pure agony. A small, involuntary soul escaped her lips. "My baby," she whispered, her voice choked with terror. Her protective instinct overrode everything else. The shame, the anger, the betrayal. All that mattered was the tiny, precious life inside her. It was not her husband who caught her. It was his father, Arthur Thorne, the family patriarch, who had been watching from a nearby table with an expression of grim fury. He surged forward, his old but still powerful frame moving with surprising speed, catching Isabella's arm just as she was about to collapse. "Get her a chair! Someone call a doctor!" he bellowed, his voice accustomed to commanding boardrooms cutting through the stunned murmurs of the crowd. Marcus finally snapped out of his paralysis. "Isabella." He rushed to her side, his face a mess of panic and guilt. "My God, are you all right?" He reached for her, but she flinched away. Her eyes filled with more pain than he had ever seen meeting his. In that single searing glance, he saw the complete and utter destruction of her trust in him. Camilla, meanwhile, seemed to realize the enormity of her actions. The triumphant fire in her eyes flickered, replaced by a flicker of panic. Assaulting anyone in this public manner was scandalous. Striking a pregnant woman was a cardinal sin, even in the morally flexible world of the super-rich. She took a half-step back, her gaze darting towards the exits. She had intended to cause a scene to force Marcus's hand, but this was spiraling out of control. I didn't mean," she began. But her words were cut off by Arthur Thorne's glacial stare. "You," he said, his voice low and lethally soft, "will not move an inch." Security. Two imposing men in dark suits materialized at his side. "Escort Ms. Tran to a private room, and do not let her leave." Camilla's face paled. She opened her mouth to protest, but one look at the unyielding fury in Arthur's eyes silenced her. Without another word, the guards flanked her and guided her away, her white dress now looking less like a bridal gown and more like a shroud. All focus was now on Isabella. She was gasping, her breaths coming in shallow, ragged pants. The cramping was getting worse. "It hurts," she cried, clutching her belly as if she could physically hold her son in place. "Marcus, it hurts." Despite her flinching away, her fear-driven instinct was to call out to the man she still on some level saw as her protector. Marcus, his face ashen, knelt before her. "I'm here, Isabella. I'm so sorry. We'll get you to the hospital." He tried to take her hand, and this time she let him, her fingers gripping his with a desperate strength. The St. Regis staff, trained for any contingency, moved with quiet efficiency. A makeshift screen was erected around the table, affording the Thornes a sliver of privacy from the hundreds of prying eyes. A medic who was on standby for the event was at Isabella's side, in moments taking her pulse, his face grim. "Her blood pressure is dangerously high. She's cramping. We need to get her to a hospital immediately." "The FV hospital is the closest, with a top-tier maternity ward," the medic announced, referring to the well-regarded Franco-Vietnamese hospital in Ho Chi Minh City, which had a prestigious branch in Hanoi. The logistics of the escape were a blur to Isabella. She was vaguely aware of being transferred to a wheelchair, of being wheeled through service corridors and down a private elevator away from the whispers and the stairs. The journey was a torment of pain and fear. Every bump in the road sent a fresh wave of agony through her. She kept her eyes squeezed shut, her hand never leaving her belly, whispering her son's name, a mantra against the encroaching darkness. Marcus sat beside her in the back of his Maybach, a silent, tormented figure. The mask of the powerful CEO was gone, replaced by the raw fear of a man watching his world crumble due to his own weakness. He kept murmuring apologies, a litany of "I'm sorry, Isabella. I never wanted this. Please be okay." Isabella didn't respond. His words were meaningless static, the buzzing of a fly in a hurricane. The man whose promises had built her world had just stood by and watched it be demolished. His apologies were not for her. They were for himself. They were the desperate pleas of a guilty man trying to absolve himself, and she had no comfort to offer him. She felt a terrifying wetness between her legs, and a fresh surge of panic rose in her throat. "Something's wrong," she gasped, her eyes flying open and locking with his. "Marcus, something is wrong with the baby." The terror in her voice finally seemed to penetrate his self-pity. He barked at his driver. "Faster. For God's sake, drive faster." As the limousine sped through the glittering, indifferent streets of Hanoi, leaving the scene of her humiliation, far behind, Isabella felt a strange and chilling calm settle over her. The physical pain was immense, but it was the emotional agony that was truly defining. The slap had been a catalyst, a violent act that had shattered the gilded cage. But what echoed in its wake was not just the sound of a hand hitting skin, but the deafening silence of her husband's betrayal. It was the echo of a lie she had been living, a lie that was now threatening to cost her the only thing that mattered. She was no longer just fighting for her marriage or her dignity. She was fighting for her son's life. The emergency entrance of the FV hospital was a blur of harsh fluorescent lights and urgent controlled chaos. A team was waiting, alerted by Arthur Thorne's influential call. Isabella was swiftly transferred from the wheelchair to a gurney, the transition jarring her body and eliciting another cry of pain. Doctors and nurses swarmed around her, their voices a calm but urgent flurry of medical terminology. Pregnant, 26 weeks, presenting with severe abdominal cramping and signs of bleeding following a physical altercation. BP is 160/100. Tachycardic. Get her to the maternity ward, stat prep for an ultrasound. We need to check for placental abruption. Marcus was shunted to the side, rendered powerless and irrelevant by the medical professionals who now held his wife's and child's lives in their hands. He stood in the corridor, his tuxedo looking absurdly out of place, his hands stained with a small amount of Isabella's blood where he had tried to comfort her. He watched as they wheeled her away, her hand still protectively on her belly, her face pale and etched with fear. The doors swung shut behind her, leaving him alone with the crushing weight of his guilt. Inside the examination room, the atmosphere was tense. Isabella was gently helped into a hospital gown, her beautiful midnight blue dress unceremoniously cut away. The pain was a constant, terrifying rhythm. A kind-faced, middle-aged female doctor, Dr. Lian, introduced herself as the head of obstetrics. Isabella, my name is Dr. Lian. We're going to take very good care of you and your baby, she said, her voice a beacon of calm in the storm. We need to do an ultrasound to see what's happening. I need you to try and stay as still as possible. Isabella nodded, tears streaming silently down her temples. Is my baby going to be okay? We're doing everything we can to ensure that, Dr. Lian said, her reassuring tone never wavering, though her eyes betrayed the seriousness of the situation. Let's have a look. The room fell silent as the ultrasound technician applied the cold gel to Isabella's stomach. All that could be heard was the soft whirring of the machine and Isabella's ragged breathing. She stared at the monitor, her heart pounding in her ears, praying for a sign, for a flicker of hope. The technician moved the transducer across her abdomen, the grey and black images swirling on the screen. Dr. Lien's eyes were narrowed in concentration, her brow furrowed. Marcus, who had finally been allowed in after an agonizing wait, stood in the corner, looking on helplessly. There's the baby, Dr. Lien said softly. He's small, but he's a fighter. Isabella let out a choked sob of relief. He was alive. But I am seeing some cause for concern. The doctor continued, her tone becoming more clinical. There appears to be a small subchorionic hematoma, likely caused by the trauma and the spike in your blood pressure. It's a bleed. That's what's causing the pain and the spotting. We need to monitor it very closely. But he'll be okay. Marcus's voice was hoarse from the sidelines. Dr. Lian didn't look at him. Her focus was entirely on her patient. The immediate danger is preterm labor. The stress and physical shock could trigger contractions. We're going to give you medication to stop them and a steroid shot to help the baby's lungs develop just in case. As she spoke, the technician adjusted a setting on the machine, and a new sound filled the room. Thump, 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 thump. It was the sound of the baby's heartbeat amplified by the machine. It was fast, a frantic, galloping rhythm, but it was strong. It was the most beautiful sound Isabella had ever heard. Tears of relief streamed down her face. It was the sound of life, of hope. Dr. Lien smiled for the first time. A strong heartbeat. That's a very good sign. A little fast, he's clearly stressed, but strong. Marcus stepped forward, a wave of relief washing over his face. Thank God, he breathed. The technician continued her work, taking measurements, capturing stills of the tiny profile, the little fists. Dr. Lien was explaining the course of treatment, complete bed rest, constant monitoring, when the technician suddenly paused. She zoomed in on one particular area of the screen, her own brow furrowing in a way that had nothing to do with the hematoma. "Doctor," she said quietly, pointing to the screen. "Could you look at this?" Dr. Lien leaned in, her professional gaze sweeping over the area the technician indicated. The room fell silent again. The baby's amplified heartbeat, the only sound. For a long moment, Dr. Lien said nothing. She simply stared at the image, her expression shifting from professional concern to one of utter bewilderment. "What is it?" Isabella asked, a fresh spike of fear piercing her relief. "Is something else wrong?" Dr. Lien turned from the monitor and looked at Isabella, then at Marcus, and then back to Isabella. Her face was a complex mask of confusion and something else, something that looked like disbelief. "Run the Doppler again," she instructed the technician. "Amplify it." The technician complied. The thump-thump sound filled the room once more. But this time the technician moved the transducer just a few centimeters, and then another sound joined the first. Thump-thump, 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 thump-thump. It was a second heartbeat, distinct, separate, yet beating in an almost identical, frantic rhythm. It was unmistakable. The room, which had been filled with one frantic heartbeat, was now filled with the sound of two. Isabella stared at the screen, then at the doctor, her mind unable to process the sound. "What is that?" Marcus stepped closer to the screen, his eyes wide with confusion. "Is that an echo? What's wrong with the machine?" Dr. Lien slowly shook her head, her eyes still locked on the monitor, where two tiny, flickering forms were now visible. She looked up at Isabella, her voice barely a whisper. "Mr. Thorne, there is nothing wrong with the machine." She took a deep breath, as if steeling herself to announce something utterly impossible. "Isabella, you're not carrying one baby." She pointed a trembling finger at the screen, at the two distinct sacs, at the two tiny, flickering hearts, beating in terrified unison. "You're having twins." The revelation hung in the air, a fact so stunning, so completely unexpected, that it defied all logic. All the previous scans conducted by a top society doctor chosen by Marcus had shown only one baby. One boy. The heir. Marcus had been there every time, beaming as he looked at the grainy image of his son. A wave of dizziness washed over Isabella. Twins. How was that possible? They had done scans at 8 weeks, 12 weeks and the detailed anatomy scan at 20 weeks. All had shown one baby, a single, healthy boy. Then a darker, more insidious thought began to form in the recesses of her mind, born from the night's catastrophic betrayals. She looked at Marcus, whose face was not filled with the joy of an unexpected blessing, but with a ghostly pallor of pure, unadulterated shock. His expression was not one of confusion. It was the look of a man whose carefully constructed lie had just been blown apart by the most undeniable, most irrefutable truth of all. The society doctor, the man he had chosen, The insistence on it being a boy. The unwavering certainty. But all the other scans? She began, her voice trembling as the horrifying implication began to dawn on her. Dr. Pham always said. He said it was just one. Marcus couldn't meet her gaze. He stared at the screen at the 2 heartbeats that had just exposed him, his mind clearly racing, searching for an escape that didn't exist. And in that moment, Isabella understood. The slap, the affair, the public humiliation that was just the prelude. This was the true betrayal. It wasn't just a simple case of infidelity. It was a deception so profound, so calculated, that it had targeted the most sacred space in her life, her own body, her own children. Dr. Lien, sensing the monumental shift in the room, spoke gently. Sometimes a twin can be hidden, tucked behind the other, especially if the sonographer isn't specifically looking. But at 26 weeks, it's unusual to miss. Very unusual. Her carefully chosen words hung in the air, a quiet indictment. The 2 heartbeats continued their frantic rhythmic drumming, a sound that was no longer just a sign of life, but a declaration of war. They were the beat of a truth that could not be silenced, a truth that revealed that Marcus Thorne had not just lied about his mistress, he had lied about the very nature of the legacy he claimed to cherish. Isabella was not just carrying his heir. She was carrying a secret he had desperately, and for reasons she couldn't yet fathom, tried to conceal. And now, thanks to the violent act of his mistress, that secret was out. Everything had changed. The revelation of the 2nd heartbeat did not bring joy. It detonated in the sterile hospital room like a silent, devastating bomb, obliterating the last vestiges of Isabella's shattered reality. The sound of the 2 tiny hearts beating in unison was a testament not to a miracle, but to a monstrous, calculated deception. Isabella lay on the hospital bed, the doctor's words echoing in her ears. "You're having twins." She looked at Marcus, truly looked at him for the first time since the news broke. The panic on his face was undeniable, but it was laced with something else. The cold, hard glint of a man cornered. It was the look of a king whose carefully constructed kingdom had just been set ablaze. "You knew," she whispered, her voice devoid of tears, stripped bare to a chilling monotone. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, a verdict. "You knew, and you lied." Marcus flinched, as if she had slapped him. "Isabella, no, how could I have known? It's a surprise, a blessing." His attempt at feigned delight was pathetic, a transparently false performance that was an insult to her intelligence. "A blessing." Her voice rose, laced with a hysterical edge. "You stood there at every appointment with Dr. Pham, your hand-picked physician, looking at the screen and telling me about our son, the Thorne heir. Was he in on it too? Did you pay him to lie to erase one of our children from existence?" The accusation hung in the air, ugly and undeniable. Dr. Lyon and the technician suddenly became very busy, averting their eyes, offering the illusion of privacy where none existed. "That's a crazy accusation," Marcus stammered, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it for the first time all night. "Why would I do that? Why would I hide one of my own children? I don't know." Isabella's voice cracked, the raw pain finally breaking through her shock. "Maybe one was a boy and one was a girl, and you only wanted the boy. Maybe you have some sick, twisted reason. I can't even begin to imagine. But you knew. Your shock wasn't surprise, Marcus. It was the terror of being caught. The 2 heartbeats, still thumping steadily from the monitor, served as a relentless rhythmic jury. Thump, 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 thump. Guilty. Guilty. Before Marcus could formulate another lie, the door opened and his father, Arthur Thorne, swept in. The patriarch's face was a thundercloud of controlled rage. He had clearly been briefed. He took in the scene, Isabella pale and trembling with fury on the bed, Marcus cornered and sweating, the damning image still frozen on the ultrasound screen. Arthur's gaze fell on his son, and the disappointment in his eyes was so profound it was almost a physical force. I have just had a very enlightening conversation with the hospital administrator, he said, his voice dangerously calm. And I took the liberty of placing a call to your Dr. Pham. A very nervous man, Dr. Pham. It seems his records from your last scan have been misplaced. Marcus visibly paled. The unspoken threat was clear. The Thorne family's reach was long, and a doctor who participated in such a fraud would have his career destroyed. Father, this is a misunderstanding. Marcus began, his voice pleading. Silence, Arthur commanded, and Marcus, for all his billions and his power, obeyed like a chastened child. Arthur walked to Isabella's bedside. His expression softened as he looked at her, a flicker of genuine compassion in his hardened eyes. Isabella, he said gently, I am profoundly sorry for the humiliation you suffered tonight and for this unforgivable deception. Whatever my son has done, the Thorne family will not abandon you or your children. He glanced at the monitor, a flicker of wonder crossing his face at the sight of the 2 distinct forms. 2 potential heirs. He then turned his full attention back to Marcus, his voice dropping to a low growl. You will tell me why. You will tell me why you would deny your own blood. Now. Trapped between his furious father and his devastated wife, Marcus finally broke. The lies, the bravado, the carefully maintained facade. It all crumbled. He slumped into the chair in the corner, his head in his hands. It was complicated, he mumbled. Complicated does not suffice when you are lying to your wife about the existence of your child, Arthur thundered. Marcus looked up, his face a mask of desperation. It was Camilla, he said, his voice barely a whisper. She's pregnant too. The air was sucked out of the room. Isabella felt a fresh wave of nausea so intense she thought she would be sick. It was a betrayal on a scale she could never have conceived. I found out a few months ago Marcus continued the confession, tumbling out of him in a torrent of self-pitying misery. She claimed it was mine. She threatened to go public to ruin everything. The anniversary, the launch of the new subsidiary. The timing was a disaster. She wanted me to leave you to marry her. She was obsessed. And your solution was to lie to everyone Arthur demanded. I was buying time. Marcus insisted, standing up, pacing like a caged animal. I didn't know if her baby was even mine. I told her I'd handle it. My plan, my stupid, idiotic plan, was to secure the legitimate heir, our son. He looked at Isabella. I needed to establish his primacy. A single male heir. It was clean, powerful. It would cement our family line and make Camilla's claim if she made it seem like a desperate, pathetic ploy from a scorned mistress. The chilling logic of his plan began to dawn on Isabella. And a second baby, a twin, complicated, that she said, her voice hollow. It muddied the waters, he exclaimed, almost angry that she was making him admit it. 2 babies. It made it seem messy, less definitive. And what if one was a girl? It would weaken my position. I told Farm to just focus on the boy, to omit the other one from the official reports, just for a little while. I was going to reveal the surprise twin later after Camilla's situation was neutralized. I swear it, Isabella. I would never have denied our child forever. It was a temporary, strategic deception. A strategic deception. Isabella repeated the words, tasting their poison. You erased our child from our lives for strategy. You made me believe I was only carrying one baby, grieving a loss. I didn't even know I had all to manage your sordid affair. The sheer cold-blooded calculus of it was breathtaking. He had weighed his children on a scale of public relations and corporate strategy and found one of them wanting. He hadn't just cheated on her, he had played God with their unborn children. Arthur Thorne looked at his son with utter contempt. You are a fool, Marcus. A weak, short-sighted fool. You have taken a crisis and turned it into a cataclysm. You have dishonored your wife, your name, and your own unborn children, all to appease a venomous viper you were too weak to discard. He turned back to Isabella, his decision made. Isabella, you will want for nothing. The full resources of the Thorne family are at your disposal. You and your children will be protected. As for you, Marcus, he said, his voice dropping to absolute zero. You are relieved of all your duties at Thorne Corporation, effective immediately. Your assets are frozen. You will go to the country house, and you will not leave until I summon you. You have made your bed of lies. Now you will lie in it. Alone. The verdict was absolute. In the space of a few hours, Marcus Thorne had gone from the king of Hanoi's business world to a dethroned, disgraced exile. He stared at his father, then at his wife, his mouth opening and closing with no sound coming out. There was nothing left to say. His lies had unraveled, and in doing so had unraveled him completely. Isabella watched him, feeling not a shred of pity, only a vast, empty coldness, where her love used to be. The man she had married was a stranger, a moral void, hidden behind a handsome face and a charming mouth. The trauma of the night, the slap the terror had forged something new inside her. The meek, trusting art curator was gone. In her place was a mother of 2, a woman who had been pushed to the absolute limit and had found not an abyss but a core of steel. The 2 heartbeats on the monitor continued their steady, strong rhythm. They were the only truth left in the room. They were her truth. And she would protect them and herself with a ferocity that Marcus and his mistress could not possibly comprehend. The war was just beginning. The week that followed was a cocoon of enforced tranquility and simmering rage. Isabella remained at the FV hospital not just for medical reasons, but for sanctuary. Her suite was transformed into a command center, a fortress from which she would plan her counter-offensive. The hematoma was stable, the risk of preterm labor had subsided, and the 2 tiny heartbeats that had upended her world grew stronger each day. They were her fuel, her purpose. Arthur Thorne was true to his word. He visited daily, not with the overbearing authority of a patriarch, but with the quiet deference of an ally. He saw in Isabella not a fragile victim, but the future matriarch of his legacy, the guardian of not 1 but 2 of his grandchildren. He provided her with the best legal team in Vietnam, a group of sharp, merciless lawyers who specialized in high-stakes divorces. Spare no expense, Arthur had told them in Isabella's presence. I want this handled with the subtlety of a guillotine, clean, final, and entirely in Ms. Isabella's favor. Marcus was gone, banished to a remote thorn estate in the highlands of Darlat. His name was scrubbed from the corporate website his office cleared out. The official story, meticulously crafted by Arthur's PR team, was that Marcus had stepped down for personal health reasons to focus on his family during a difficult pregnancy. The story was just plausible enough to quell the rampant speculation. But the real story, the one whispered in the boardrooms and elite social circles, was that the king had been ruthlessly deposed. Camilla Tran was also dealt with. Arthur's investigators had worked with surgical precision. They uncovered her own web of debts and deceit. The pregnancy, she claimed, it was real. But a discreetly obtained DNA test from a coffee cup she'd used at a cafe proved what Arthur had suspected: the baby wasn't Marcus's. It belonged to a married Singaporean businessman she had been seeing concurrently. Armed with this proof, Arthur's lawyers presented her with a simple, non-negotiable choice: disappear quietly, with a modest one-time settlement and a signed NDA, or face public exposure fraud charges and the unmitigated wrath of the Thorne family. Camilla, a pragmatist above all else, took the deal and vanished from the Hanoi social scene as quickly as she had appeared. But for Isabella, these victories were peripheral. Her focus was singular. It wasn't about revenge on Camilla, or even about punishing Marcus anymore. It was about reclaiming her narrative and securing an unassailable future for her children. During her days in the hospital, she began to change. The soft, deferential woman who had once organized art exhibitions was replaced by a shrewd, calculating strategist. She devoured the financial reports her lawyers brought her, learning about trust funds, share allocations, and corporate governance. She had once loved Marcus for his charm and ambition. Now she studied the architecture of the empire he had built, not with admiration, but with the critical eye of a conqueror. Her gambit when she finally revealed it to her lawyers and a stunned but impressed Arthur Thorne was audacious. "I don't want a simple divorce settlement," she announced one afternoon, her voice clear and steady. The hospital suite was bathed in the soft afternoon light, and she was propped up in bed, surrounded by financial documents looking more like a CEO than a patient. "I don't want cash or property or alimony." Her lead lawyer, a formidable woman named Ms. Vi, raised an eyebrow. "Ms. Isabella, given the circumstances, the infidelity, the public assault, the staggering fraud regarding the children, you are entitled to one of the largest settlements in this country's history. A settlement makes me a pensioner of the Thorne family," Isabella stated calmly. "It makes me a wealthy victim. I have no interest in being a victim." She looked directly at Arthur. Marcus's shares in Thorne Corporation, his voting rights, his seat on the board. I want them transferred to a trust that I control as the sole trustee for the benefit of my children. Arthur stared at her, his expression unreadable. Ms. Vi's jaw practically dropped. Isabella was not asking for a piece of the pie. She was demanding control of the bakery. "He will never agree to that," Miss Vi said. "That's his identity, his life's work." "He will agree," Isabella said, with chilling certainty. "Because the alternative is that I don't sign a non-disclosure agreement. The alternative is that I give a full, exclusive interview to the Wall Street Journal. I will tell them everything about the affair, about the public assault by his mistress, and about the meticulous medically assisted fraud he perpetrated to hide the existence of one of his own children for strategic gain." She let the threat hang in the air. It was mutually assured destruction. The scandal would not just destroy Marcus's reputation permanently. It would taint the Thorne Corporation name for a generation. It would cause shareholder panic, invite regulatory scrutiny, and become a legendary case study in corporate malfeasance and moral bankruptcy. I will detail how Dr. Pham was pressured to falsify medical records. She continued, her eyes locked on Arthur. I will explain that my husband's immediate reaction to discovering he was having twins was not joy, but terror at his lie being exposed. I will paint a picture of a man and a corporate culture so obsessed with a clean, powerful narrative of a single male heir that it was willing to deny a child's very existence. Arthur remained silent, his steepled fingers covering his mouth. He was a ruthless businessman, and he recognized the move for what it was, a brilliant, perfectly executed checkmate. Isabella had found his single greatest weakness, his obsession with the family legacy. She was using the sanctity of that legacy which Marcus had so carelessly desecrated as her ultimate weapon. She wasn't threatening to take his money. She was threatening to burn his kingdom to the ground. Finally, he spoke, a slow smile spreading across his face. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated respect. "He'll sign," Arthur said, nodding to Ms. Vi. "Draw up the papers." The meeting with Marcus was arranged a week later, after Isabella was discharged and settled into a new, secure penthouse, one chosen and paid for by her from an advance on the trust. The location was neutral, a private conference room at the Sofitel Legend Metropole Hanoi, a place of old-world power. Isabella walked in not as a victim, but as an equal. She was no longer pregnant and hiding behind flowing dresses. She had given birth 2 days prior to 2 small but healthy babies, a boy Leo and a girl Luna. The birth had been premature but uncomplicated. Her body was tired, but her spirit was forged in iron. Marcus was already there, flanked by his own lawyer. He looked diminished, a ghost of his former self. The tailored suit hung loosely on his frame, and the arrogance in his eyes was gone, replaced by a weary resignation. He hadn't seen Isabella or his children since the night at the hospital. He stood when she entered. "Isabella, I heard about the babies. Are they?" "They are fine," she said, her voice cool and professional, cutting him off. She did not take the offered seat across from him, but remained standing, a silent assertion of power. "No thanks to you." She gestured for Ms. Vi to present the documents. Marcus's lawyer read through them, his eyes widening with each clause. He leaned over and whispered frantically to his client. Marcus just shook his head, a broken man. This is everything," he whispered, looking at Isabella. "My shares, my seat, my entire life." "You have a life," Isabella retorted, her voice sharp as glass. "You have one because I am choosing not to scorch the earth. I am choosing to protect the family name for the sake of my children. This is not a punishment, Marcus. It is a consequence. You proved you are not fit to be the steward of this legacy. So now I will be." She finally sat down, her gaze unwavering. "You will have supervised visitation rights. You will be provided with a generous allowance, enough to live comfortably, but not enough to cause trouble. You will, for all intents and purposes, retire from public life. In return, the world will remember you as the man who stepped down for his family. It's a better legacy than the one you were building. You should thank me." There was a long, heavy silence. Marcus looked at the documents, then at his ex-wife, the woman he had so grievously underestimated. He saw not the gentle girl he had married, but an empress in the making. He had created her, in a way. His betrayals had been the fire, and she had walked out of it reborn, holding his entire world in her hands. With a trembling hand, Marcus Thorne, the deposed king, picked up the pen. He signed away his power, his company, and his future, all to the steady, silent rhythm of 2 tiny heartbeats he had once tried to erase. The Empress's gambit had succeeded, and so the story of the slap that shocked Hanoi's elite took its final stunning turn. It was never just about a mistress's fury or a husband's infidelity. It was about a deception that ran to the very heart of a family and the quiet, unassuming wife who rose from the ashes of public humiliation to seize control of an empire. Isabella Thorne, once a footnote in her husband's story, became the author of her own rewriting her destiny, not with tears, but with shrewd intelligence and the unyielding power of a mother's love. She proved that the greatest strength is often forged in the deepest betrayal, and that sometimes the most powerful move is not to destroy your enemies, but to simply take everything they hold dear. What did you think of Isabella's ultimate power move? Was it justice or the most brilliant revenge? We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you were captivated by this story of drama betrayal and ultimate empowerment, please give this video a like and share it with someone who loves a story where the Queen finally takes the throne. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next tale of secrets, lies, and stunning revelations. Thank you for watching.